So my name is Thomas Myrholt. I'm an equity research analyst with Sparebank One Markets in Oslo, Norway, and I cover the Norwegian listed salmon farming companies. And I'll just go ahead with a little presentation on the salmon market. So I will take you through our view on the salmon market, the price, and how we believe it to develop throughout the different phases of the coronavirus and going into 2021. Hopefully, laying the foundation for the panel discussion later, where the industry guys can discuss this in much greater detail. But just to summarize our hypothesis. So we believe that Corona ultimately will be a positive for the salmon industry, and it's rather difficult to argue that right now with prices down 30%. A lot of people are negative, and the outlook is not that great at the moment. And obviously, 2020 will likely be a poor year for salmon. But we view it as sort of a marketing campaign for salmon long term, because right now you have a lot of consumers that are forced to learn new recipes to replace meals at home that they usually ate outside. And on the other hand, you have supermarkets overflowing with cheap salmon and promoting this through its channels. So in combination, we argue that this will recruit a lot of new consumers, and that over time, Corona will be a positive for the salmon industry. So just to take a quick look on what's happening right now. So here we are focused on the European market, and here 30% of consumption is within the Horeca segment. Looking at the US, for instance, the Horeca share is somewhere above 40, and it's much larger in Asia. But compared to food in general, where 1 out of 5 meals is eaten outside of the home, salmon is a product that is very much reliant on the Horeca segment, 150% of the food in general, we can argue. So the initial effects of closing down the Horeca segment is obviously very large for salmon. And looking at the historical relationship between changes in price and volume, we see it's a one-to-one relationship. Here we looked at the Norwegian export volume versus the Oslo price in euros. If you had looked at the global supply, it would indicate a much lower price sensitivity. But we argue that the local supply demand is more important in the short term. And this is actually what we have seen in the prices during the Corona situation. So in early this year, we expected prices this spring to be between 7 and 6.5 euros. And right now we are down at 4.5 euros approximately. So it has been approximately 30% decline in prices over the last few weeks and months. And another aspect here is the bargaining power in negotiating prices, so that which we believe is better among the buyers of salmon, in that they can sort of wait out the situation in a bigger degree, and then the salmon farmers. But in our opinion, much of this development is rather short term. And to try to illustrate that, we have here a picture from Billingsgate Fish Market in London, where buyers from restaurants and hotels are frequent visitors. So this market sells an estimated 25,000 tons during a year. And now you are in a situation where this market closed in the end of March, early April, and you have to move the salmon from these cases down here into the retail sector. You have to process it, cut it in, put it in plastic containers, and then get it into the retailers and into the shelves. And that's a process that's obviously going to take some time. And just to redirect these volumes in terms of salmon fillets of 125 grams, it's 100 million of them. So it's obviously a difficult task. And we do see this in other products as well. For instance, French fries, where prices has collapsed in both US and Europe. And French fries is not a premium product. So we argue that it's in both salmon and French fries, it's not the underlying demand, it's just the problem. It's the supply chain adapting and needing time to adapt to a new reality. But in our opinion, if this was a new normal, then a lot of the Horeca demand would naturally return in the retail segment. And we have tried to calculate this. And the answer we got was that 60% should naturally return in retail. And that is because consumers they still have the same demand for nutrition and calories as before Corona. And it's only the channel in which those meals are consumed that is changing. So the home consumption of food needs to increase by 25%. And if you assume that consumers are maintaining its current preferences, then 60% would be returning naturally. But we have also spent a lot of time on Google Trends trying to look a little bit deeper into what consumers are thinking at the moment. And we are seeing that searches for the local word for recipe across European countries are skyrocketing. So, for instance, in Spain, the search for recipes are 4 times the normal level at this time. And in that regard, we argue that people are changing its habits, are forced to change its habits over this special times, and that these new recipes that people are learning is likely in favor of the global megatrends we're seeing, like eating healthy and sustainably, and that salmon ultimately will be sort of a winner in this situation. And we do see also the same trends for searches for salmon. For instance, Spain, which is one of the countries that has been very hardly hit by the Corona situation. You see searches for salmon going up, and in Germany as well. But here we have this Easter effect normally. It's only that the level this year is much higher than a normal year. So we argue that in this situation, you're going to recruit a lot of new consumers. And actually, this Tuesday, we saw or we heard that Bakkafrost commented on this hypothesis, and that they had read some surveys indicating that 50% of retail consumers were first-time buyers of salmon. So we believe that you are now recruiting a lot of demand, and then it's important to look at how the salmon consumption really is, and that is dominated by frequent consumers of salmon. And interestingly, the higher the frequency of consumption, the higher you rate the product. It's this TRIM index, which measures customer satisfaction, where 100 is the highest score. And so if Corona is successful in recruiting new consumers that perhaps ate salmon a few times out in restaurants a year, and managing to get them to buy salmon at home and increasing their frequency, and these consumers share the preferences of the groups they land in when they turn counterclockwise towards a darker blue, then you would not only recruit a lot of demand, but it would also be very sticky when the Horeca segment returns. And an important example of this is Germany from a few years back, when from 2012 and over a 5-year period, they managed to double consumption of salmon in a period in which prices also doubled. And that was mainly because of Lidl and Aldi promoting a lot of salmon or freshly packed salmon through its stores. And right now, we argue that we are in a situation where all of the world are doing sort of the same thing, and could see that demand should be fairly good or salmon demand should benefit from this. And to try to summarize the different phases of this development, obviously the first effect was the Horeca segment closing down, and we're now in the middle of sort of redirecting that demand towards the retail segment. And this is the 60% return we talked about earlier. One can argue very easily that you should have another bar on top of this to indicate the changes in habits as well. But then the next phase, we argue that a fair share of this new retail volume should remain, and that when HoReCa manages to get back to its former glory, that demand actually is, or the effect on demand actually is positive. And there are good arguments that it would take time for a HoReCa segment to return due to the changes in the economy and purchasing power and so on. But at the same time, we did see from China that as soon as the society opened up, the Norwegian export to China went back to the same level as last year, and even higher, because one could argue that people have been staying inside for a few months and they need to go out and eat at restaurants. But given this effect right here, and China, which is a market in which HoReCa is a very large share of the consumption, we argue that the salmon should be one of the quick rebounds as society returns to normal, and it will be interesting to follow that development over the next few months. But that was sort of the demand side of the equation, and in which we are very positive on. And the supply side, there's been a lot of people highlighting this harvest for the autumn of 2020, and in which we have 7 to 9% more fish to harvest than last year. And we remember the low prices we saw in the autumn of 2019. So this sort of casts a shadow about for the salmon price. But in our opinion, this is actually to some extent a good thing, because when HoReCa demand returns, you want to have supply to meet that surge in demand, because you don't want the prices to just jump up to the pre-corona levels and kill the retail demand you have recruited over the last few weeks and months. You want a smooth transition in price to let the retail demand and habits really settle among the consumers, and then sort of rather luring them up to a higher price level. So we argue this could be viewed as a very positive for the salmon price. And then when you look into 2021, the situation is actually fairly tight. We have 2% less individuals to harvest, and I should have mentioned that this is a Norwegian biomass figures. But before Corona, you had a situation where the prices were in Europe were around €7+ euros, and then next year, with the newly acquired demand surge and fewer individuals to harvest, we are fairly positive to the outlook for 2021. And just to tie this back into some price estimates, so we expect then that the prices here should start to rebound in late 2020, and that in 2021 we should see somewhat higher prices. Here we are a lot above the current forward market, but still we are far below what we have seen over the last 3 years. And as a consequence of the current biomass situation, we argue that the range of potential outcomes is weighted towards the upside right here. So we have a very positive view on the salmon price and industry going forward. And so this is sort of our big picture look on the whole industry, and hopefully we can get some more detailed discussions going on among the industry players. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Before we go into a panel chat, has anyone got any questions for Thomas on that, or any points, just out of interest?
I have a question, if I may. This is
go ahead.
You mentioned on, say, page number 10, you have the supply side, and it's clear that there's a timeline attached to this. But on the page 8, you're talking about this phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're not describing them as laid out in any timeline.
No.
Surely it looks like you have some kind of assumption on this, but maybe you can comment on this timeline in your view. What is the timing of phase 3 and phase 4?
Yeah, so the timing of the different phases we're not sure of. So my job is trying to value the companies, and sort of the longer term view on the whole situation is more important than exactly what quarter this happens in. And I think you are better at predicting exactly when this will happen. But we are seeing that both the US and also now in Norway, where I'm sitting, we are opening up. I think it was yesterday we started opening up restaurants, and it will be a soft opening, but hopefully we can get some more view on how the Horeca opening will be over the next few weeks.
Harold, you also had a question as well.
Yeah, taking into consideration the economic downturn and the disposable income is probably going down in most markets. How do you see that affecting the market or the demand side from your perspective?
Yeah, so that is obviously a big factor. The economy is sort of not as good as it was half a year ago, but at the same time, we argue that to some extent, the people that are now being punished, in lack of a better word, the restaurant employees, hotel employees, and so on, they're probably not the people that have the highest share of salmon consumption from beforehand. And from my own perspective, I still have my job. I don't have much to do on my spare time because everything is closed, except being at home watching Netflix and preparing some good meals. So I'm not sure if the purchasing power or the increase in unemployment is that it's representative for the purchasing power of the population as a whole. But if this turns out to be a more long-term effect on the economy, the view gets a little bit more darker, of course.